All right, so welcome everybody. Happy Halloween. All right, happy Halloween. I am doing a from start to finish pumpkin swirl cheesecake for all of you. So I hope you all enjoy this. It's a pretty easy recipe if you know, what you're doing, kind of a thing. So you guys have the recipe, you guys have the recipe, and you guys will have the recipe. I will post it. And then you can always go back to the video so you can sort of go back and see exactly how it needs to come together. So this is a three-part kind of a thing. We make the crust and we make the two fillings, and then it all comes together. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my food processor, bring it over, and in the food processor in goes 6 dates. Pit it, make sure you always pit your dates. This right here, the pits, they will break your food processor, okay? So do not trust buying pitted dates. Buy them whole, pit them yourself. If you don't break the food processor, you'll break somebody's tooth. Maybe your own, somebody else's. So 4, 5, 6.
Does it matter what type of dates you use?
I prefer using medjool dates. They seem to have like the perfect stickiness ratio. And then we're gonna add our pecans. Let me pulse that real quick. Basically, you wanna just break these up so it's all the small little pieces. Not too long. At this point, I go ahead and add my brown rice flour. Okay. And now this is sort of like dry sand texture. Okay. And now we're going to make it into wet sand texture. Okay. So when the wet ingredients go in, it's a very, very quick kind of a thing. So this is 2 tablespoons of non-dairy milk. Sometimes what I do is actually cut that in half, so it'll be 1 tablespoon of that such dairy milk, and I'll substitute 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. So that seems to work pretty good, actually. Alright, so on, 1, go, and that's it. From there, my wet sand texture comes in. So you'll know that this is right if you sort of grab a little bit and you can roll it into a ball really easy. You know that it's perfect. All right, so I'm going to set this to the side really quick. I'm going to show you what we do is I take a, they call this a springform pan, okay, which seems to be very helpful. It's called a springform because this spring here helps release the pan. And then I'm going to take some parchment paper here, and then don't need that till later. Get a piece big enough so that it will cover the bottom part. I will then take the ring and get it to insert back in, lock that in, okay? In case you're wondering, this is a Whole Foods, I think it's like Jamie Oliver's, yada yada something, and fairly inexpensive, but they've been actually very durable, so I like these.
I love the color.
Yeah, it was, I like it too. It was the only one available. I probably would have chose something a little bit more manly, you know, like black. But I'm like, oh, they have this, whatever this is called. Baby blue, so. Okay. I am now going to then take a piece about this long. And hopefully I eyeball this correctly. So now I'm going to use 2 strips to line the rim here of the. Can I scratch that? It wasn't long enough. Okay, that should work. And so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to use the perfectly flat side of both ends of the parchment paper so that I can line the whole thing. You can, if you want, to just get one big long piece, but then you end up with this sort of cut off piece of parchment paper that you may or may not end up using. So I always do it in halves. I set it flat right on top of that, and then I take my scissors and then I cut that, flip it over. If you go right after that, what happens is you have now a piece that isn't completely straight. So, all these little technical things that make this better. Okay.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Now you end up with this sort of ribbon that doesn't want to cooperate. I take the scissors themselves, and if you do a lot of Christmas gift wrapping, you know this sort of technique. You rub it backwards so that it straightens it out.
I already have many questions for you, but maybe I'll wait.
Okay. All right. So then I put one of it in, and then make sure I got the right edge here. Okay. So now what I have is this fully lined springform pan with parchment paper. Okay. At that point, you can go ahead and drop your wet sand in here. This is going to be the crust, gluten-free, sugar-free, whatever other free you want. Okay. Now, what I do is I usually take, from here I take a small square, and this is going to help me be the, sort of my, excuse me, my spatula. You could do it bare hand or with a glove maybe. If you do it bare hand, you'll end up with a super sticky hand. That's why I always use a little piece of the parchment paper that I already cut up here. And so then at that point it's just you push, rotate, push, rotate, push, rotate. Okay.
I have to say that I think we got the short stick on this deal because probably someone there is going to eat the cheesecake that we
Those that are not fasting might get a piece.
You all come. Because we asked people that they're ready to eat.
Okay. Now, I don't know how well the camera can capture it. So there's all these, now that I pressed it, there's all these sort of bumps. Okay, so it's not very even. Then what I do is I'm going to sort of hold this with my thumb and then flip my hand over a little bit, and then I'm going to use it sort of as a flattener. So I just go like this, just to get it really nice and flat. Probably doesn't make really any difference if it's, you know, got those bumps or not. That's just the chef in me trying to make it as even as possible.
Wait, now I'm enjoying because you were sharing every trick that you know.
Yeah. All right, so now this goes in an oven at a regular oven at 400 degrees. If you have a convection oven, 350 degrees. Probably in the 8 to 10 minute sort of mark. It depends on like if that's the only thing you have in the oven. This would be like middle rack, by the way. But if you're like us here in the kitchen, things are going in and out of the oven all the time. So we really go by the look of it. And so the other thing I do, just because it annoys me, once it gets to this part.
Wondering when you're going to do that.
So I just cut the edges so that I don't have all this extra paper just sort of floating around. And so, again, in the oven, a lot of times what will happen is you'll stick it in there, about 5 minutes later, you might rotate it and, back in so that you get an even browning, okay? So now, as I mentioned, we're gonna do this from start to finish. Here's the next step. Okay? Nice and golden brown. Okay, so now we have that. We'll set that to the side. And we now can start with our fillings. Okay, so the pumpkin filling here, I'll get that going. Here is the coconut milk. That goes in. And by the way, I know that people are going to ask, this is what we're using. Coconut milk, Thai kitchen. Okay, Thai kitchen. And for the pumpkin, we use Farmer's Market. Okay. You can certainly...
Full fat or reduced fat?
Full.
Full fat.
Yeah. If you're going to go cheesecake, you got to go all the way.
All right. From Jim, he wants to know if he can use sweet potatoes instead of canned.
Absolutely, yeah. You can actually make your own puree. This is just an easy way, because if you tell people pumpkin cheesecake and then you got to roast your own, your own pumpkin, or you can just grab the can and like, oh, I can do that,
All right. But sweet potato is fine.
Sweet potatoes fine, yeah. I would call it then a sweet potato swirl cake, Okay, so that goes in. Then got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay. Other thing you have to watch out for, not only do the dates have pits, sometimes they have the little stem part in there as well. I don't know how well you can see it there. So you want to make sure you get that out also. Okay, so dates go in. My cashews go in. And now the agar flakes go in. So you can ask your question now. 2 tablespoons, so there's 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves. Okay?
So the question is, when they use agar flakes, like bloom the agar, isn't this required? Also, can agar powder be substituted for agar flakes?
It can be substituted, but the problem with that is that you might end up putting too much because the powder is more compacted. There's less air, space in there. So I would cut it down just a little bit, and so instead of 2 tablespoons, I might go, so if 1 tablespoon is 3 teaspoons, I might go 5 teaspoons, okay, just so you know. And then I need a 1/4 cup here of apple juice, okay.
Rick, I have one more question about agar flakes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's substitute cornstarch.
Say again?
Okay, to substitute cornstarch
No.
for the agar flakes?
No. Yeah, that's a no. You will lose so much flavor, and I couldn't even give you like the proportions to substitute it with. But worse than anything else, you will lose so much flavor using cornstarch. Okay. All right. So
You soak the cashews?
I have a question here in the audience asking if I soak the cashews, and the answer to that is no. If you soak cashews and then throw them in there, I'm adding 2 ingredients to the pot. Where are they?
Water.
Cashews and water. Okay? And you don't want watered down cheesecake. Come on. This here is very important. I tried doing this recipe a couple times and it just was not working out the way I wanted it. It didn't work. Okay, so this here is a key ingredient. Juice of 1 lemon. Okay, and it just provides enough acidity so that everything else, it has a nice contrast to it. Okay, without the 1 lemon juice in there, it just tastes like a big mouthful of pumpkin spice. Okay?
So good.
All right, and speaking of which, pumpkin spice needs to go in as well.
When you use non-dairy milk, it should be any non-dairy milk, including oat milk, right?
Yeah, oat milk, cashew milk, rice milk, almond milk, any of them. You know, it's a 1 tablespoon. It's not going to really make a huge difference. You could even do like 2 tablespoons of the vanilla extract. You know, it's just a little bit of liquid. Okay, so here we have 2 tablespoons. So there's half, 2 halves, 3 halves, and 4 halves. Okay.
Chef, one more question.
Yes, question.
Are the cashews and the pecans, are they raw or roasted?
Raw. You want them raw. Because everything's going to go, the question was, are the pecans and the cashews raw or roasted? You use them raw. Once everything goes in the, gets cooked or in the oven, you know, you get that out. Plus, especially with the cashews, you don't want to use roasted cashews because you'll end up having a cashew flavor. Okay, it'll be like there, you will taste it. And we want it to be a pumpkin flavor. Okay. All right, so that goes in the burner. Okay. And then my other guy here, so there is the cashews. For this one, we also need 2 teaspoons of agar. Okay. So there's that. The half cup of apple juice. And then
Where do you get agar?
you could buy that at Whole Foods, health food stores. What agar flakes is it's a gelatin, a plant-based gelatin. Gelatin is, if some of you know, if you don't, you're about to learn. Gelatin comes from animals, hoofs, cheeks, pig's feet. Pig's feet have a lot of gelatin. Okay, and so if you like Jell-O, you're eating like all the bits and pieces. Wow. Chicken feet, they have a lot of gelatin. And so Jell-O comes from all of that. But luckily, nature provides us with a alternative. So now I am, where you going? I'm peeling 3 pears. Sometimes you can, depending on the time of year, you could use white peaches or white nectarines. Okay, so this is for the white part of the swirl. That is why I'm using.
What the type of pear do you use?
It doesn't really matter. I've used, different pears at certain times. All I'm trying to do is to get that white flesh in there to give me that color contrast. So.
Can you use canned pears?
You could use canned pears as long as they're not, the whiter the better. Yeah. I've never tried it, but I don't see why it wouldn't work.
Did you put agar and the pear filling as well?
Yes, yes. That's important. If you don't have the gelatin in there, you're gonna end up with this very thick pumpkin filling that will set, and then the other one will just be liquid, sort of in there.
Is this one 2 tablespoons as well?
This one, 2 teaspoons.
2 teaspoons.
Teaspoons, yeah. And the reason why it's less is because there's less of this one. Okay, so by volume, we use less. Okay.
Ramsey, someone asked, it looks like the recipe doesn't have honor in the pear filling. How much did you say was needed?
Yeah, it's missing.
It's missing in there? Sorry, 2 teaspoons. 2 tablespoons in the pumpkin filling, 2 teaspoons in the pear filling. Sorry about that. You all should probably make a note in there because it won't work if you don't have that in there. So, okay, we are now going to get this going. All right. There's also a couple of dates that go into the pear filling. Again, you want to remove the pits.
Is there any apple juice in the second part?
Yes, there was half a cup in there.
Okay.
With this one, again, as a chef, you do a recipe multiple times, and then you try to figure out, any way that you can improve this. So what I found was that if I actually peel the, we'll call it the skin of the dates off, the pear filling stays whiter. So the skin actually provides quite a bit of color, which I don't mind in the pumpkin filling because that's going to be that dark orange color. But for the light filling, I always like to take my time and peel the skin off. Now there you go. All right. So, and really just as long as you bring it to a simmer and you have it at a simmer for a couple of minutes, you're good to go.
The pear filling.
Both of them. Yeah. So now, because I did the pumpkin filling first, that one came to a simmer, and now I just turn it down to the lowest setting on my burner so that it'll just sit there. Okay? You don't want to cook this at a too high of a temperature, and then you end up with too much evaporation. Okay? So it's a gentle simmer.
And now a question for the crowd. Please describe the smells that you can smell right now.
They're asking you guys to describe the smell. Most everybody here has a mask on, so I'm the only one here without a mask, and that's because I'm far away enough from everybody. So I can tell you that it's this sort of, right now, it's the sort of spiced pear aroma. That's how I would describe it. So this is done. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to blend all this. And I wanted to pull this just a little bit forward so this camera here can see. So I'll show you all here in just a second. This is what the pumpkin filling looks like at this point. It's sort of this sort of soup with the cashews sort of floating around. I don't know how well you guys can see here.
It's caramel color.
And then the pears just look like, there's a few pears sort of swimming around in just a little bit of liquid here. All right.
Can I see that once more, Chef? That one. Yeah.
This one? Yeah.
A quick question about the agar flakes versus the powder. For the pear filling, if you were to use powder, how much less would you use?
Let me think. You'd probably want to use a teaspoon and a half.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now I get this on my Vitamix. I'm just going to blend them till they're really, really nice and smooth. Take about a minute or so. you're really trying to do is make sure there's no cashew chunks in there. Nothing worse than, you know, biting into a grainy cheesecake, you know? And I don't know if you caught it, it went from like this sort of brownish thing to a more of an ivory, so it did get a little whiter. That never happened when I had the date skins in there. So the whiter this is, the more contrast at the end. What's that, I'm sorry?
It's amazing how the color stays so light.
Yeah, oh yeah. All right, the other thing is, once you're done here, you got your blender, tap it a bit, okay? Because it's the Vitamix especially is such a powerful blender that it will incorporate some air into this. So you want to sort of get those air bubbles out, okay? All these little things. All right, so now the pumpkin filling goes in. Here's another trick, by the way, or another tip. When you're adding your ingredients to the pumpkin filling, do not put the pumpkin spice at the bottom. It will stick to the bottom of the pot. It will kind of sort of get stuck, and then it won't be in the filling, okay? So you want it at the top where it can mix with the liquid first, and then you're fine. Otherwise, you know, I'd be sort of scraping the pumpkin spice off the bottom of the pot here. So. So funny, I can do this in such a clean way, such an efficient, you know, but since I had to bring everything to one table, I feel like I'm like all over the place. But when I do this, I grab my ingredients for the crust. The moment the crust is done, I put those away because the way we have it set up is the pecans go into the fridge that's right here, right away. And then everything goes there. I pack it, that goes in the oven, and while that's going on, I put everything in the pots. But I feel like I'm like I'm Chef AJ right now. Yeah, go ahead.
If you only have one Vitamix blender, like the jar, can you just blend the pear first, take it out, and then add the pumpkin, or it's going to mix the flavors?
No, you'll be fine. That'd be the perfect way to do it. I would just take the spatula, the rubber spatula, and get as much of that pear out of there. And when you pour it into something, make sure the container is at least room temperature, because if you have, you know, the sort of hot thing and you have a cold container, the moment that mix hits the cold container, it'll set. Okay? So have it at least room temp. Okay. Again, let me see if camera can watch. As I tap it, you'll see all these little bubbles come up.
Yeah.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Oh. All right. So I pour about half of this in. The smell now has changed into more of a, you know, pumpkin pie kind of a thing. I always take this and tap it just to push more of those air bubbles out. Because if you have those trapped in there, once you cut it, well, what you're going to end up with is a hole in your slice. And then you'll be sad. So I do a dollop here in the center. Okay? And then I go around once. So it's sort of like a bullseye here inside of the pot. Okay? And then I go over it, and I want to cover as much of the white as possible. Okay, so now the white sort of disappears. Tap it again, and then we repeat. Part in the center, and then you go around. Okay, and then again, cover it. At this point,
Who likes the ball?
no, not quite.
That's what I was thinking anyway. I was like, I'll do that. Oh, at this point, you start eating. Yeah.
Pass me that.
I look a little awkward doing it this way. I'm trying to get myself out of the way so the cameras can see. Okay. Tap it one more time. And then we'll do the same here. A little bit in the center. Where's my other spatula? Oh, I used them both. It's all right. Okay. So something like that. Okay. Tap it again. And so now you see this sort of a messy, sort of topping here. Everybody in the audience is standing up so they can see. Okay? All right. And now, I'm going to do this only one time. I do not want to overmix it. If I do, the colors will start to blend. So either with a toothpick or with a paring knife. I'm just going to go, whatever that motion is.
Swirl.
Swirl, yeah. So I'm going to go 4, 5, 6. Tap it one more time. Maybe I'll do 7 just because that little piece right there, could have used it. Okay, so now I am going to go back in the kitchen and bring out the one that's done.
There was no base.
Okay?
And put Can I ask another question?
Yes, of course.
If you wanted to keep the recipe raw, would it set in the refrigerator the way it is?
If I wanted to keep the recipe,
Yeah, and just put it in there and put it in the fridge, would it set without baking it because of the agar?
oh no. Once you, that's a great question. Once you pour your fillings, you let it cool down room temp and then in the refrigerator. It does not go back in the oven. I got to do a quick recap for the audience. So remember, we make the crust, we pat it, push it down. At this point, this is what gets baked. Okay, this goes in the oven, 10-ish minutes, 350 degrees convection, 400 non-convection. When it comes out, okay, you have your fillings, you blend them, you pour, okay, just like you saw me pour the last one. That one just has to cool down to room temp. When it's at room temp, I stick it in the refrigerator, preferably overnight, and that's what this guy here is. Okay, so the only thing that gets baked is the crust.
And how long will this last? How long is it good for?
Not very long, people get a hold of it.
Maybe one day.
15 minutes.
The question was, how long this lasts? And I say, not very long.
Before it goes bad.
Since it has the, it has a good amount of natural fat because it's got the cashews and the coconut milk, it could theoretically last you 7 days in the fridge. Okay, and so now at this point, I'm just peeling the 2 strips of the parchment paper. Okay. As I was setting it down, I don't know if you caught it. I had my hand underneath the piece of parchment paper that was underneath. I had it on there, and so I just basically set it, the edge of it on the cutting board, and then I peeled it, and then I let it slide on the cutting board there. Okay. I have this particular knife that I use for all my pies. It has sort of the very thin blade in the shape of a spatula. So this is what I use. I would avoid using a serrated knife because a serrated knife will sort of start, curving edges on the slices. It helps if you have a little container here of water to sort of dip the knife in. I shake the excess off, and then I sort of eyeball it first, and you go, okay, that's about half. So I go ahead and cut there. And then dip again. At this point, you just sort of figure, okay, raise your hand if you want something. Everybody's raised their hand. And then you go, okay, count one, and that's how many slices you need. We always cut ours in quarters first, and then each quarter gets cut into thirds. But we're probably going to go quarters and then quarters again. So now you see I have it in quarters. And then from here I would just go, okay, now I take each quarter and I go half. Okay, and that will happen. Sometimes it'll follow you. And then I make sure to cut that in half.
So beautiful inside.
Okay.
I'm glad that did that.
And so you'll see that once you cut it, you see all the swirls everywhere. If it starts to get sort of buried up on you, this is the reason why I use this knife in particular. If it starts to get smeared up a little bit, and let me see if the camera can see it. I take my knife and scrape that, and sort of it cleans up the edges. If in fact it does do that, sometimes it doesn't, and then you just go, okay, there we go. So.
Ramses, if there does happen to be any leftover, can you freeze slices?
I say again?
If there does happen to be any slices left over, can you freeze them?
Yeah, you can. You can freeze anything. Stick a human in the freezer, it'll freeze. Your question is, does it thaw out well? It does. Human, not so much.
And a skeleton out there, he's so sticking.
We caught that, huh? Somebody's paying attention. Okay. All right.
So, and this is a true north approved size, I take it. Bigger than this?
Yeah, this would be about the serving size. And remember, here at True North, we serve dessert maybe like once a month. And then we can always do a little finishing touch. No, a little bit more of the pumpkin spice. And really nothing more than just a sprinkle on the plate.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So there it is, Roseanne.
Yay! That's great. Looks amazing.
Let me get a little sound effect here.
Two
Go.
questions here. Why do you dip your knife in the water? It's just to clean, right?
Just so that when I cut, the cheesecake sticks less to the knife. It helps it come off.
Okay. And then the other question is the pear filling supposed to be cold before you add, or room temperature?
No. Both of them should be ideally warm. The moment they start to cool down, the agar flakes in both of the fillings start to coagulate. And so you want them, fairly warm so that you can, pour nicely. Otherwise, you end up with globs, in the blender container. So you want to work with this fairly quickly.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you.
Loved your costume. You made it
All right. You're welcome, thank you. You probably won't recognize me next time you see me. Chef Bravo from Chef at True North Health and also creator of BravoPB.com. So I hope you all enjoyed the show.